My guest this week is Alex Laing, principal clarinet for the Phoenix Symphony. Alex is a black classical musician who has worked his way up to one of the most prestigious positions for any musician studying classical music. He's a very bright person. He's a deep thinker. He's a really good friend of mine. We got to work on a project of his through an organization he started called The Leading Tone, and now he started a new project called Artistry After School. He plays in various ensembles besides being in the symphony itself, and he had a spectacular couple of years from 2017 through 2019 where he was awarded some very prestigious awards and even got to play at Carnegie Hall. I'm really thrilled to have Alex on the podcast, and you will find that he is very interesting, very funny, and I was so glad he was able to take the time out of his day to sit with me and have this conversation. We got so deep, this has turned into a two-part episode. The first part, we go through his life up until today. The second part, we talk about all of the projects and what he's trying to do to help and change the world. And I hope you really enjoy this episode as much as I did speaking with my dear friend, Alex Laing. Hey everyone, welcome. I'm glad you are joining me for this episode. Again, I'm very grateful that I am in your ears and you've chosen to listen to my podcast. Today I have a very special guest and friend, amazing musician. I was lucky enough to meet him, get introduced, to work with him on a special project a few years back. We've stayed friends ever since. We don't get to see each other much, but it's nice to see his face here on the podcast. And he is principal clarinet for the Phoenix Symphony. Welcome, my friend, Alex Laing. Welcome.
Hey, nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, man. So I want to, like I do with a lot of the guests that I have on the podcast, I kind of want to start from the beginning. And I want you to bring us up to today. And then I want to talk about some of the special things that you're doing. But I want to first start with your musical career and like as a child, did you start early or was this something you got into later on? And so basically my first question was, when did you get, like you can start and it doesn't have to include music. You can maybe kind of bring us onto the on-ramp of how you started in music at a younger age.
Sure. Yeah. So I think it starts for me in school. Right. I went to a school that had a lot of music in the curriculum, but interestingly, no instrumental music instruction program. So it was a small school, alternative education, based on the philosophies of this one guy, but it's called the Waldorf School. There's more of them in Europe, but there's a few here in the States. In any case, there's a lot of music, a lot of song, a lot of music across all sort of classes. Your language class, your main lesson, your this, your that. So I think that they gave us recorders in like first or second grade, and that was, I think, the first time when me and the people around me sort of started to notice that there was something with Alex in music. I mean, you'd have to ask my parents if they saw it earlier, but that's when I remember it, right? So I would bring the recorder home and I was good at it, right? It was like something that came relatively easy to me. I was figuring stuff out by ear really fast and having, playing, bringing it home and, just being a weirdo with
it. And was this in Maryland?
Yeah. So I grew up in I was born in DC and grew up around DC. I grew up mostly in Silver Spring, Maryland, and the school. Yeah. So that was that, and then around sort of typically my sort of the regular rhythm. I think summer between fourth and fifth grade. My mom and dad say like, hey, you're going to do a music program this summer or something. I was like, okay. So they signed me up for lessons at the DC program that the DC Youth Orchestra ran. And so in the summer, the DC Youth Orchestra would run they take over this a school, is Calvin Coolidge High School in Tacoma Park, DC. And they would run like their youth orchestra, both like the senior and junior division, like doing all day intensive type stuff for the week or weeks. And then they would also run group lesson, beginner, intermediate, advanced, right? So I started, of course, in beginner clarinet with like 20 other kids. And we picked the clarinet because I didn't really pick it. My parents picked it because I didn't even know what a clarinet was, right?
I'm so glad you're actually explaining this, because I was going to say, is it just like the natural progression from recorder to clarinet? But I'm so glad you're explaining this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's, yeah, I mean, well, again, this is without like a band program or anything. My mom, I think, sort of figured a woodwind because the recorder, that seemed to be something that I did. Though a musician, might have been looked at. I was a bigger kid. I'm a bigger person still, someone else might have looked at my hands and been like, ooh, like cello or piano, they might have
baritone sax.
Baritone sax, right? Because every fifth grader
Right.
should start on baritone sax.
Wants to haul that around. Just like
exactly, exactly. We all want to grow up and be Jerry Mulligan.
Yeah.
So,
right.
That I think my mom was sort of figuring it out on her own in that regard, like, oh, woodwind and recorder and clarinet, they kind of looked like they might be similar. And then the kicker was that my grandmother, her mom, had been a big fan of Benny Goodman, like a big fan. And so this idea, I think she had wanted her kids, my mom and her siblings, to play clarinet. No one had. And so this idea of like, I think that also sort of put the clarinet. But I remember, this is funny, is I remember that on the drive down there, and I totally get this now as a parent, right? Because you're like, there's probably some, like, the kid is like, you're playing with blocks, you're not paying attention. For my mom, it may have been like a real like rush to get out the door, and two kids at that time and whatever. But I remember on the drive down there, she's like, okay, well, look, if she's talking over her shoulder, right? If clarinet is full up, we're going to sign you up for oboe. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I don't even know what these things are. But to look back and be like, man, if I had just like, we've been a little bit later, maybe, who knows? Where
Right.
I've like, oboe, that sounds nuts.
Right.
So, and why not saxophone, actually, looking back, Mom? But anyway, I guess, so thankfully, the clarinet were still open. And so, you go, they give you, it's all like inclusive, right? So they like, we went up there, signed up, and left with a rental instrument, like right there. And I went home and like figured out how to put it together. Like, no, it's in pieces, and set it up backwards, had the reed on the top of the instrument as opposed to on the back, and like started playing. I learned, and that day I like figured out how to play something, and it went from there. And so, then fortunately that fall, so that program wrapped up that fall. My parents went to Ellsworth Music Studios in Bethesda, Maryland. And it happened, the clarinet teacher there was a guy named Charles Steyer, who was only going to be there for like, as time moves forward, he only ends up being there for like another couple months or something. And then he started teaching out of his house, or maybe a year. But in any case, we made that connection, and he became my teacher. And I studied with him from age 10 to 18. It was a really intense, dedicated relationship. He gave me a lot of time. I gave him a lot of commitment and effort. And and that's sort of that's like me 10 to 18 in a nutshell.
Got it. And you mentioned earlier, and we should bring it up because you're sitting down, but you are like, what, 6'2", 4?
Yeah, 6'3", 6'3". Yeah.
Yeah. So one of my questions was, when, as a young kid,
mm-hmm.
Same thing as you, I wasn't as quite, we've had this conversation. I wasn't maybe as quite committed musically, because I would definitely go in my room for hours and practice the drums but just play the records. I couldn't stand the rudiment part of it and all of it. But I also played in Little League. I played in soccer. I was like a high school captain of my soccer team, that kind of stuff. So did you play sports? Because
definitely.
Because you had the physique. So I was wondering how you were able to balance the two.
There wasn't really any balancing that needed to be done until like junior year. Definitely, to answer your question, Joe. Yeah, I defined myself as an athlete not a good one, trying to be good. I grew up in the neighborhood I grew up in, sports were like the sort of currency. You know, that was what we did. We played different sports with the seasons. I lived on a cul-de-sac. So we had this, you know, sort of round space in between all our houses, and that was our football field, our baseball field. You know, we even played hockey a little bit, like street hockey. You know,
Hmm.
like we were just, you know, a lot of the energy for that came from my older brother, who was you know, really, so competition athleticism really sort of defined the neighborhood. And um, I was bigger but younger. You know, so I was size wise like with them, but age wise about 3 years behind. So I can understand now that that's why. Like I was like decent, but I was not the best one. But then I would go to school and I was the best athlete, right? And I know now that's because you were competing against, no matter how size you are, like the wiring of the nervous system. 3 years is a big amount of time just in
Oh
terms
yeah.
of being coordinated and understanding how to move your body and experience, right? Just having done the thing. So yeah, but in school I was an athlete, again, small school. So I mean, very much like, you know, for the Hoosier fans out there, it's like I went to Hickory, right? I mean, there were 50 kids, 60 kids in my high school class. In my whole school, there were 9 kids in my graduating class. So being a standout athlete in the midst of that, you know, take it for what it's worth. But yeah, basketball was my sport. I played soccer, like I played soccer and played soccer probably up through like freshman year of high school. Never played baseball beyond Sandlot, but basketball was serious about it and took that pretty seriously. Around junior year, to answer your long story short, answering your question, junior year is when the two started to conflict with each other. And there was a big basketball tournament. At the same time, there was some musical thing, some opportunity to do something with the clarinet. And I chose clarinet, which, you know, was disappointing to my coaches, my teammates, not coaches plural, but, you know, whatever. I left it, you know, but it felt like what I needed to do. And then I didn't go out for basketball senior year. That was the first time. And then that was like the real sort of, so that moment in some, you know, fall of junior year is when I really had to make a decision. And that just sort of solidified like what my identity was. I was a musician, you know, not an athlete. So yeah.
And during this time, were you already planning that your life would be everything involving music, and you were one of those people, unlike myself, who literally just panicked like in senior year, like I want to go away to a music school and I haven't thought about any of this. And did you plan it?
Yeah.
And before you even did that, I wanted to find out, were you playing an orchestra and band clarinet? Did you do
Oh
both?
yeah
Okay,
yeah.
so you had a little.
No.
Oh,
I'm acknowledging the question. I
oh,
didn't
okay.
do either, actually,
Oh, okay.
bizarrely, Joe, which was like a weird wrinkle in my musical development. So to unpack all of that, I did start planning around 8th grade. I remember saying out loud, like, um, I was going to major in music and business. Like that was a thing. Like, I mean, it is a thing now, but I don't
Hmm.
know. I didn't mean business. Someone, I meant like, yeah, just some sort of like white collar thing.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Yep.
Um, my dad was an attorney. I think early on, I thought I would say stuff like that. You know, I want to be a lawyer. I think in 8th grade, I'm saying music and business. And I think the significant part is that music is like something I'm naming as something I'm going to do. I don't think I knew at that point, like what one did to make a living as a musician. I definitely didn't know that like orchestras were a thing. So getting back to my school, right? Small school, no instrumental program at all. So I didn't play. I auditioned for like all state band, in like 8th or 9th grade, and got in and went away and did that weekend. Felt really out of sorts. You know, I was already this like weird because I was going to, like, I was having a very different, just sort of regular school experience, because I'm going to this small alternative private school. There's probably some racial elements there, just like being around a whole bunch of different people. But mainly the other thing was, like, I didn't know anything about band culture. So it was just very like, so I never did that again. And then I got a fellowship from the National Symphony in DC, like my junior or senior year. And so I started to do some stuff through them and going to National Symphony rehearsals and concerts and taking lessons with members of the orchestra, starting to understand that as a thing. And got to play in some side-by-side situations with the National Symphony. I had one really formative experience in that regard. Like the first time, like you talk about playing along to records, it's the first time, like, I was playing along to a record of like, it was Beethoven's Fourth Symphony, but it was like the record was like the live musicians. It was the first time I had that feeling. It was like, it still lives in me. It was just really was amazing. But I didn't play in large ensemble with any regularity until I got to college. And just to geek out on the music part of that a little bit, what that meant, as you can imagine, Joe, is like, I didn't know how to play with other people, and I didn't understand the importance of like collective pulse, rhythm, intonation. Like, I didn't even begin to understand that as a thing until much, much later. But just the basics, like, I really at that point didn't understand like why you need to understand with some specificity and depth that a dotted quarter has 3/8 notes in it, right? I was like, there's the quarter note, that's the beat. There's the half note, that's 2 beats, and there's the dotted quarter, which is like in between.
Oh my God.
Which is fine if you're learning, as I was learning. Most of my study was like some etudes, and then pretty quickly we got into real literature. So a lot of my formative study from like high school through college is like learning major concertos, Mozart, Nielsen, Weber, all this sort of stuff. So I'm like looking at the music, listening to recordings, translating the notes on the page, translating the sounds that I'm hearing through the notes on the page. There's a sort of a mix of all those things, and then creating like really for the time, I think, pretty polished, mature sort of reproductions of these pieces or productions of these pieces, but not doing the whole like 6 clarinets, sight reading this thing together, and sort of learning how to turn the cymbals into sound in a way that lets you work with other people. So my first year at Northwestern, I did, of course, not of course, but I did well on the placement audition because I could play the clarinet. So they're like, oh, wow, we're excited. Great. We're going to seat you principal clarinet of this wind ensemble. So for me, like, that was like great because I wanted to win. I was a competitive person. That's, I think, where the sports and the music thing come together. Same as you, right? Like, you sort of translate that competitive. But brother, man, I I made such a mess of stuff because I didn't know how any of it worked. I didn't know how any of it worked. I knew how to play the clarinet.
So this is, even though we've known each other, I never heard this before. So this is really interesting to me based on the fact that you have reached a very high level in the musical community and music in general. So just to clarify, because you went to this small private school and they had no ensembles, instrumental ensembles, the entire time, all of this playing that you ever did was only when you went away to one of these camps, or only when you did all state, or all of it. Like, so you basically took the clarinet and continued to improve on it and play it and work on it solely on your own without any.
No, I had a private teacher. That one private teacher.
Besides that, you never literally got to play in ensembles and groups with other people where you brought up all these great points about timing and intonation and pulse and feeding off of each other and all of the things that happen in this ensemble until you got basically to college.
That's right. And so music wasn't a social thing for me. It's interesting. So I'm a child of the 80s and the 90s. So like Karate Kid, like very much sort of matched. I had my Mr. Miyagi, like this sort of off the beaten path teacher, really dedicated to me, teaching in a kind of different way, definitely teaching sort of artistry first, and then like learning sort of function second, as opposed to like, we're going to do function, function, function. And then when you get all these basic rudiments together, we're going to, like what you're describing, right? The stuff you didn't have patience for. I mean, we did a lot of that for sure, to be clear. A lot of just like technical, but still it was in this context of like, trying to be him in many ways. I think it was a lot of what that was about, for better and for worse, right? That, he was this artist and I was trying to be this artist. And I mean, he did right by me in so many ways, right? And I didn't see music as a social thing. So I'm not a band kid in that regard. It wasn't like, music wasn't something I did with my friends. It was something I did with my teacher, which is different, I think, than a lot of people. But yes, the short answer to your question is no, I did not. I did not know how to play in ensemble, and I did solos. But again, you're working with an accompanist. That's a very different dynamic. These are adults who are like, running around with a net, catching you when you drop beats and skip stuff, and like, it's a whole different. It's a whole different thing. I didn't. So yeah, it was a sharp learning curve in college. Yeah. So.
And so when you started playing when you started becoming more mature in the clarinet, did you ever think that the direction you would go would be away from classical music? Because Benny Goodman's jazz, right?
So, yeah.
So if that's what you was given to you as a sort of, this is the person we admire as a clarinet player. Did you ever dip your toe in the jazz pool at all, or
no, it was always classical. And while the Benny Goodman story, you tell your life story so much, right? And you get good at it. So that's sort of like my cocktail party story of me and the clarinet. And so Benny Goodman makes an appearance, and I actually did see Benny Goodman's like last or next to last live performance at Wolf Trap in 80 whatever it was. But that's just, again, just sort of an intersection. No, it doesn't. I remember in 6th grade, so at this point I've been playing for like a couple of years. You'll appreciate like Najee and Kenny G and Spyro Gyro, like these bands are like, especially Najee was like this idea of like smooth. It's kind of, I don't know if it was, but smooth jazz. Kenny G's like on the regular radio, right? And so and everyone's like, Alex, that's the instrument you play, because to most people they're like, soprano saxophone, clarinet, it's just like they're the same, right? Aren't they the same? And so I remember going to my teacher and asking him like, hey, couldn't I switch to the soprano saxophone? He was like, basically, no. So, and I mean, he couldn't have, that wasn't something he could do and all that. I definitely wish that I had those desires. I wanted to play music that like people around me recognized as music. I wanted to, I wanted that. But it never happened. And it's still sort of, I still have like itty bitty aspirations to try to, get a little bit of improv ability. It's frustrating because, and embarrassing, the number of times when people have been like, they hear your story, they read your resume, and they're like, oh man, especially other musicians, this is the worst, man, this is the worst. Other musicians will be like, oh man, and you meet them and we got to do something together, man. Let's just come over, and you got to be like, for do, like, I don't know how to do that, right? Like,
if there's no music, count me out.
Yeah. I joke with friends. Remember that old Saturday Night Live with the setup is it's like a morning show. Will Ferrell's in the bit, and it's like the teleprompter goes out. David Alan Grier's in it as well. The teleprompter goes out, and in the course of like 3 commercial breaks, the show goes completely Lord of the Flies. Anyway, there's a degree to which I feel like that describes my experience. Like the notes, where are the notes? So
all right, so basically 2 things. So first thing is, do you have a soprano sax somewhere hidden in your house?
I don't have a soprano sax hidden. I will say this though, man. Soprano sax shows up in the story, and for your audience and the stuff you talk about, I think this isn't. There's some relevance here. Soprano sax shows up for me because a friend of ours, Huey Lovelady, here in town in Phoenix, big contractor. Used to be in Vegas, so if you want to know some stuff, go check that out. Huey comes to me because the show Wicked is coming to town to do a sit down in Phoenix, and he's contracting it. And Wicked is sort of a weird Broadway show in that the whatever number is, read four or whatever, is a really basically just like a straight clarinet book, right? So it's clarinet, heavy clarinet, pretty heavy E flat clarinet, moderately heavy bass clarinet, and like super light soprano saxophone, like just like 20, 30, 40, 50 bars of soprano saxophone. At this point, again, I'm so like narrow. I had not ever actually played even bass clarinet, like didn't own one. I don't know. I must have been just like a pain in the butt because I just don't see how my college teachers let me go 4 years without ever having to spend a semester sitting on bass clarinet somewhere. But I remember being really clear that I didn't want to. And I think they were just like not interested in dealing with me. And so they let me not, but it wasn't good for my development. So I didn't know what to do. So he was like, do this thing. I'm like, nah, man, I'm not going to, no. And he came back a couple times. He came back the first time they came to town, he asked me, I said no. The second time he came at that point, I was looking for something different to do in the Phoenix Symphony. Long story short, I say yes. And I'm just going to have to learn how to play the soprano sax. And he was a sax player. He's like, I'll make sure you're totally overthinking this, Alex. It's going to be fine. It's going to be great. There's plenty of months to learn it. And I did it and went fine. It was a real learning point for me on two things. One, it got me out of the orchestra, which I was really looking for at that point. And it gave me some confirmation that like, you can do things out of here. You don't have to be as dependent on this place for your everything, which was liberating and important and right on time on a number of levels. It also sort of taught me the rewards that can come with taking a risk, and that you can say yes to something that you don't know how to do yet. Maybe not if it's due tomorrow, but you can say yes to something and believe in yourself that by the time this thing is due, I'll figure it out. And that opened up a whole new, like if that's possible for you or for me at least, it opened up a whole bunch of things and a whole way of looking at the world that like I could pursue opportunities that I hadn't gotten all the answers to yet. And if I got them, I would figure it out, and that was exciting and confirming. So see, the soprano saxophone ended up saving me,
That's very cool. Yeah.
It was just 20 years later. And I loved it, to be clear, just to end. I really enjoyed playing the Spanish saxophone. And it did make me think back to that time in sixth grade and be like, oh man, like what would have happened? Because I love the instrument, actually. Love's a strong word, but I do like it.
But you never went and purchased one?
I did not go and purchase one.
Okay. I just want to make sure there's not a closet soprano saxophone.
No, there's here's the closest. I got something. I got a prop. Hold on, let me see. I have a crushed metal clarinet. A buddy of mine gave this to me as a novelty. It's a metal clarinet that he puts on this like industrial press. So he buys, discarded instruments and then turns it into this art
that
piece.
Is so
hang
funny. It would be a better story if you said that actually you ran over that with your car.
Yeah, it would. Yeah.
That'd be a funny story. All right, so you are at Northwestern because I know we jumped all the way to Phoenix already, but I want to go back because I want to do the progression from Northwestern to. Yeah. So keep going from there.
So I'm at Northwestern. Went there because the sort of biggest, most prominent clarinet teacher in the country at the time was there, and I will say that again, the sort of the direct sort of path of so-called classical music, especially orchestral music, it's built a lot on competition, right? And so I got that, right, and this idea of like, just try to keep winning, right? And eventually, like, somehow that turns into a career. I'm at Northwestern, came in really hot. And then, it's pretty, from a musical perspective, I think if you back up and look at the whole graph, it's kind of a decline for me for the next 3 years musically. I mean, not to say, and this is not one, I was coming at one, I didn't understand like music, a lot of what was going on around me, right? So I didn't really the whole sort of culture of music schools and band and orchestra was foreign to me. I didn't get it as a like social thing in many ways. I wasn't interested in it also as a social thing. I think also, I had been so shaped by this one relationship, teacher student, which was really powerful and helpful, but also just really unique and not the normal relationship that you have with a private teacher, especially at the collegiate level. You see them for an hour in a week. They're interested in you. There's other stuff going on. They might have a full-time performing job somewhere, even at a place like NU, which is, pretty intense school of music. But a lot of the faculty are active practitioners in the Chicago area, in the Chicago Symphony. Things felt different. The competitive piece was very much intact and strengthened at Northwestern. I think in some regards that sort of helped me because it gave me like it's on a quarter system. So 3 times a year you're auditioning for placement. So there is that sort of constant feedback and jockeying. Again, though, I would say the competitive piece, it makes it difficult. I thought, how do you connect to people that you're also like, everyone's always worried. And then it's a bunch of insecure 18, 19-year-olds, right? Just the whole sort of social, emotional thing. So that's all going on. And things are up and down, in that regard. I'm doing okay. But, I'm sort of, top middle of the pack of, and I'm also I can like have some amazing like breakout moments, right? Where this week, this piece, this thing, but I can also have some moments where it's like, I have no idea why I can't do X, Y, Z, right? So my understanding of like a lot of the fundamentals and rudiments and my understanding of like when things weren't going well on the instrument, like why that was happening, that was very low at that time. So that's the music thing. On the social side, though, like Northwestern was amazing for me, right? That it was the first time I got to be in a big school, right? Coming from this tiny, tiny school, where this is radio, not television. So your audience might not know, but I'm Black, and so
tall, dark, and handsome is the way.
Yeah, that exactly.
The way I refer to you.
Exactly. So Northwestern was the first time. Was exciting in that regard from the social aspect, right? For me, it was a bigger Black community than I'd ever had before. A Black peer group that was exciting for me. Pledged my fraternity, one of the 4 traditionally Black fraternities. That was really great. Again, though, to get, that was sophomore year. That was a huge time commitment, a huge priority. First time in really ever I had put something kind of ahead of the clarinet, right? I was socially not very involved or invested in the School of Music. Academically, completely invested, right? I'm a music performance major. So that's all playing out. Meanwhile, the teacher that I'd gone there to study with, he's a giant in the field. He's older at this point. When I get there, he's already older. I never was going to see him as a full-time student my freshman year because he didn't take freshman. But the plan was that I would move into his studio my sophomore year, but his health started to fail, so he didn't take on as many students for what would have been my sophomore year. Very proud moment for me was when I went to register for my junior year and had now been moved into his studio. So I filled out the little bubble form and like, that's who my private studio. It was like, no, it definitely felt like, okay, this is getting back on track. I'm now moving into his studio. I'm sort of winning again by virtue of doing that. It just felt like that. 2 weeks before my junior year was set to start, I got a call at my home in Maryland from the dean of the School of Music to tell me that Mr. Marcellus, the teacher I'd gone there to study with, had had a massive heart attack and stroke and was not going to be returning to school that fall. And as it turns out, he never returned to teaching at all and sadly passed away not too long after that. So now I'm in my junior year and I'm like, just Northwestern from a musical clarinet perspective has not turned out the way I wanted it or expected, or in my case, or for not just my case, I really felt like it needs to, right? Because the whole idea is like, keep winning, right? You got to keep winning, and eventually you're in the winner's circle playing in an orchestra. That's sort of and so, and also I'd taken my sophomore year, right? Prioritized something other than the clarinet, prioritized pledging my fraternity and all that came with that. So my teacher from high school, who I was still in contact with, helped put me in touch with a teacher that I wanted to study with kind of eventually. It was sort of part of that same family of learning and teaching that my teacher from high school had come out of, a guy named George Peterson, who at the time was principal clarinetist of the Concertgebouw Orchestra in Amsterdam. So I spent my junior year doing school and all that, but also setting this up. And I actually withdrew from Northwestern after my junior year and went to Amsterdam to study with this teacher. I did an artist diploma while I was over there, so I enrolled in the conservatory, and that really changed things. I was, on my own in another country, and the only reason I was there was to practice the clarinet and get better. I just switched to a different instrument at that time, like a new clarinet. So it was sort of a fresh start in that regard, like we're starting over. This is 1995, right? 94, 95. So like no cell phones, at least not for regular people, right? No internet, not really. Like having a laptop wasn't, that wasn't really a thing. So I was really isolated. I didn't have any, I was over there for 15 months. I was broke. But I was hardcore practicing the clarinet and poured everything into that. I really saw it as like a make or break moment and threw myself at it like that and came back, I was practicing 5-6 hours a day and away from everything and everybody, new teacher, new environment, new ideas, so I grew and developed a lot and then came back, finished up at NU and, went on to the Manhattan School of Music. I did, and there was a really competitive program that they had there called the Orchestral Performance Program, which was you would do a master's, but it was going to be focused exclusively on orchestral instrumental playing. So you're not doing recitals and sonatas and concertos. It's all focused on the orchestral literature and specifically the orchestral audition, which, is like the bar and the NFL comp, so the legal bar or your medical boards and the NFL combines and a job interview sort of and a open winner take all tournament all sort of wrapped into one, right? And so a lot on the line if you can win, right? You can change your life. So at that point, a new teacher came into my life, Ricardo Morales, who was the teacher in that program, who was this was transformative for me. I was ready for it. And also he's just transformative. I mean,
can I ask you something about the teacher?
Please.
So the teacher in Amsterdam. And so when I ask this question, I'm basing it on my own experience with taking lessons from someone that I had aspired to take lessons from, and they're at a very high level. Would you say the teacher in Amsterdam was the highest level at that moment of your life that you had ever taken from?
Yeah, I mean, the highest level that was really my first teacher, that 10 to 18 stretch. He was in many ways like more like a root guru, than this was the first teacher that he approved of, right? Which,
it's a big thing.
It's a big thing. Looking back, look, that he did so right by me. So there's nothing. You do have to release your students to learn from other people, right? You have to empower them, and you have to and so I think that was maybe a little late coming for me, especially because again, the whole Northwestern thing, I went there to study with one person and never got to do that. So there's a sense of oh, this isn't turning out the way it is. The guy that was available to me was amazing. And if I had committed to him, right? I mean, a lot of, as you know, as a teacher and as a student, a lot of it is about trust, right?
Right.
You got to commit. When your teacher says do this, you got to do it. And if you're like thinking you might know better, or you want, you know what I'm saying, it can really get in the way of that. And so I never connected with him. Anyway, getting back to Amsterdam. Yeah, it was the first time since high school, the first teacher I had who I was empowering, who my teacher was empowered. And I think an interesting thing, Joe, it was the first time I was hearing someone like an approved source saying things that were different than my first sort of origin, which in my experience was new. And that was also liberating, right? To have someone say like, oh, you should go left at the fork in the road. And I was like, but I was taught to go right. Well, I'm telling you to go left. Yeah. What happens when you go left? And then like, oh, interesting things are happening. New things are happening. I wonder. I'd always wanted to go left. And you start to empower yourself a little bit. So yeah, that was transformative. The main thing though of that year was, so he was a huge impact. The other thing was I really put the clarinet back at the center of my life, and constructed my life so that there really was not much to it besides that. Right. So a year sort of isolated, no contact. Really, this is nice. It sounds old. You never think you're going to be the person, right? You never think you're going to be the person like giving up years like this was whatever. I was like, yeah.
We never wanted to have this conversation we're having now in our life. We're like, where you have to go back to years and explain that there was no internet.
Yes. Or like, that's a thing, right? I mean, like, right. But my main source of contact with my family, my girlfriend at the time, all that was writing letters.
Yeah.
Writing letters. Right. I didn't have any money. So like international calling, that was, there's no Skype, there's no, so I put the clarinet at the center of my life and then lived a life in which there was not very much else. And so I had a certain sort of drive and asceticism. Honestly, the sophomore year, pledging the fraternity and some of the tribulations around that gave me an extra gear of grit. I mean, you and me, we talk about this stuff a lot, right? Embrace the suck. Yeah. Like, find a way to take satisfaction in the work and the hard work and the suckiness of it. And I definitely did that year, right? Every time I felt lonely, I was like, well, you should maybe do what you came here to do. Go practice some scales.
Right. Well, so, and that was part of my question, and it could be relevant for both your first teacher and then the next one in Amsterdam, and then going to this, Manhattan School of Music. But when you get to teachers of that level, from my experience, they don't screw around, and they don't want you wasting their time. But more importantly, I think what frustrates us as teachers is that when we see potential in someone, it really drives us crazy, right? It's like, you wasting my time is one thing if you're just average or you suck. But if you're good, if I can see the potential in you and you waste your time and my time, it becomes really frustrating. So I was wondering, was your very first teacher, did he ever have one of those days where you walked in and he's like, you are not prepared, you're wasting both our time? And
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that was a really close relationship. He was close to my family. But definitely, he knew me from age 10 to 18, once a week. And as I got older, the lessons got longer, right? So, my senior year in high school, junior, senior year lessons are 3 hours long, 4 hours long.
Really?
Yeah, man. I would get over there at like 5:30. We would work from like 5:30 to, I'd get over there at 5 or 5:30. I think it's 5. I had the 5 o'clock spot. We would work. His wife would come home. There'd be a break. We'd have dinner, and then we'd go back to work. Right. And it was great in so many ways. It was a level of commitment. And again, this is like my understanding of like what music lessons are. Again, so it's like very different, right? I mean, it's my socializing is social. So music, to the degree it was a social thing, it was socializing with my teacher and his family, his wife. They didn't have kids. Which is different from socializing with your peers, right? It's a different type of environment, different sort of understanding of like what's happening, what's supposed to be happening. So definitely to answer your question, yeah, there's those moments. With my teacher in Amsterdam, we had one of those moments, and I
Okay.
never. Yes, I had one
You only need
early
to have
on.
one, and then
I
you
only
don't
had,
want to
yeah,
have them again.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. With my 10 to 18. I mean, he was, again, he knew me from when I was literally a little kid until I was an adult, and so. There was moments where he told me to, get my head out of my butt and stuff like that. But there was never a thought that like he was going to quit me. Like that
right,
wasn't.
right.
So early on in Amsterdam, yeah, there was I had two rough lessons with him. One, he asked me to do something and I didn't do it. And then the other one, I showed up and I had to learn a piece of music, an etude, and I'd learned it like the notes, but I really hadn't like really learned it as a piece of music, turned it into music. And yeah, he sent me home. He cut my lesson short. He was like, "Look, I mean, I'm not here to teach. I'm not here to do the work for you.
Yeah.
Just go home."
Yeah.
So that was like, "Oh, okay, all right."
I feel like I definitely had a lot more of those than you have had, because
Yeah, well, but I don't know about that. But in any case, yeah, I only needed one of those, and I was like, all right, not. But again, to your point, it was like, oh, okay, like I'd never had a teacher do that. Actually, I'd never had a teacher be like, you don't need me to. I'm not gonna. You don't need me, and so go.
yeah.
So yeah, yeah. Anyway, what's next? What do you want to talk about, buddy?
So now we're at Manhattan School of Music, and you're in a very intense, to
Yeah,
put it lightly, program.
yeah. So now I understand the importance of there being 3/8 notes in a dotted quarter. At this point, I have figured that out, and Manhattan is actually where a lot of that happens. Where, I'm really now I have the skills on the instrument. I'm sort of back on track in a way I hadn't been pretty much for my whole college career in terms of like I'm in sort of an elite place, and I'm competing and seeing it, and I'm able to do it consistently. My playing is starting to get a lot more consistent. I can dial up the results. One of my mantra when I was in Amsterdam, it's grim. I actually said it out loud. I was doing some teaching over this summer, and I said it out loud, and I was like to share with some students. And afterwards, I was like, I have to revisit that because that's time. But my mantra was eliminate hope. Then here's why. I wanted to eliminate the feeling of like right before I started to play a solo or an audition, like, I hope this goes well, right? This idea that I was subject to like clarinet gods that were either going to smile on me or not. I wanted to eliminate that. I wanted to really understand like the instrument and my ability to like deliver the goods on demand when the clock strikes midnight, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like now, do it now. So that had paid off. So by the time I got to Manhattan School, I was really starting to be able to like, I don't know that my best playing has gotten all that much better, right? Since I was like 16 or 17, as much, and there's stuff I could do at 16 I can't do now, right? Because like my tendons are old. But the wave has gotten a lot more narrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole thing. That the dip, like my worst playing, is so much farther above, what could. And so Manhattan is where a lot of that starts to happen. I'm playing in an orchestra a lot. I'm stepping out and competing and getting some spots in some of the elite summer programs. So I go to Tanglewood, I go to the National Repertory Orchestra, and I'm training with Ricardo Morales, who first time I had a teacher that wasn't white. So Ricardo's from Puerto Rico. And while this wasn't like an often or constant topic in our lesson, it was the first time that the subject of like me and my teacher not being white the way most of the people in the band were, and like he was able to mention that in relation to himself. The recipe was this sort of simple recipe. It was like, oh, you just got to be like way, way better than everybody. So come on, let me show you how, right? So it wasn't like we didn't spend a whole bunch of time hovering around it, but that was a new construction. the main thing though was another thing that was impactful on that is, Ricardo is only 18 months older than me. So I'm doing my master's, but he's principal clarinetist of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra at age, he got that job when he was like 21. And I mean, just to put it in context, I mean, if aliens landed and they said, take me to the highest paid orchestra on planet Earth, at the time it was the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, right? If aliens landed and were like, take me to the most, prominent, hot shot, like it was him, right? Take me to the highest paid, it was him. Like he was killing it. This is a guy who was in the semifinals to be associate principal clarinet of the Boston Symphony when he was 16. I mean, just a freak show, right? And I mean that it was also, here's another thing, because I mean, you'll get this, both of us coming from sort of a competitive framework. It was the first time that my teacher's playing was on another planet from mine. And it relieved me of competing with my teacher, which turned me into a much better student, right? So now there wasn't any, like my defensive mechanisms were obliterated in the first 30 seconds of hearing him play the clarinet. Like the whole sort of, oh, I could do that, or maybe I could do that, or finding fault, all the stuff you do to sort of protect your ego and your need. Like there was no way. I'm still not. There's no way. My goal is, as it relates to trying to sound like Ricardo, is like, he has 60 acres of like ability, and it's like I have like, I don't know, whatever I have, 10. Can I develop my 10 such that if you drop them into his 60, it would be seamless, right? So I am trying to make the stuff I do measure up to what he can do, but he can just do so much more. I mean, and that was liberating. I'd never heard, and that made me a better student. It also just changed what I thought the goal was, right? So now all of a sudden I was like, oh, that's how Shostakovich 10 sounds? Oh, that's how? So like I had a lesson with, my audition was on a Friday. I flew into New York on a Tuesday, had a lesson with him on Wednesday, heard him on Wednesday in that lesson, had him tell me some stuff. He at the time, he was young. He was 25. I mean, I was 25. He was 25. He was 26. I was 25. So he wasn't like he's a very like active personality, active mind, constantly going, like probably, you have to like literally like unplug him Matrix style to get him to stop. Played a lot in the lessons back then, a lot of teaching by showing. And that was great for me at the time. I think he does more listening now, and he's like, he's middle-aged like us, so he's calmer. But I was a better player by Friday, is the short answer to that story. I had a lesson with him on Wednesday, and I was playing better by Friday just because I had a different paradigm.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So he was great. He was great. The studio was great. Everyone was supportive. We were competitive, but there was a few of us there, and we were, he did a good job of sort of making us feel like we were one team, all in it together. And, yeah, so then that's Manhattan School. Took my first professional audition maybe 2 weeks before graduation. And then, yeah, so I left Manhattan.
And who was that for?
The audition was, your neck of the woods. The audition was for the Syracuse Symphony.
Oh.
Yeah. Didn't get out of the first round. Didn't deserve to. But took the audition. And actually, ironically, fortunately for me, that turns out to be the longest audition list of any audition I ever took. So the first audition I took, which had all the added pressure of like, I'm doing it and blah, 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 actually was like asked the most of me. So I all the music that I had to polish and learn and everything, I didn't have to add too many more pieces to the repertoire after that point. Which was good, that's just sort of a lucky right. Turn of events.
It was a good foundation for
auditioning. Yeah, it was a good first audition. Yeah. It was a good look. I didn't have to get on a plane. I went down to Penn Station. I got on a train. Yeah. I went, but that whole experience of like going to another place and checking into a hotel and then like showing up at some stage door and being ushered into a room and then like told to wait here and then told to wait there and now and now here's your 30 seconds. Go.
Right.
And
so what was your first professional landing of a orchestra or symphony type
gig?
Yeah.
So coming out of Manhattan School, I auditioned for. I had my heart set on getting into the New World Symphony in Miami, which is they call themselves America's Orchestral Academy, but it's like a summer festival that doesn't end for an orchestra. It's a great sort of thing to do after school. It's all about, you can be there for a maximum of 3 years, but the goal is to get out of there and win a tenure track job somewhere. And again, this whole idea of like, just keep winning, so I didn't get it. I got like runner up or something like that. And I had taken an audition to go play in the Civic Orchestra of Chicago. So the Chicago Symphony has a training orchestra called the Civic Orchestra, which is it's a great program. I was thinking of it just like as a backup or whatever. But I got in and didn't get into New World. And so went back to Chicago. At this point now, I'm starting to take auditions. The next audition I took was for the Naples Philharmonic in Florida. And did well, advanced this time, got into the late rounds. But more importantly for the story, ran into someone I'd gone to Northwestern with who had stayed in Chicago and built a teaching studio. And now she was moving somewhere, I think to Memphis, maybe to play in the orchestra. And we just happened to run into her. Hey, how are you? Good to see you. Blah, blah. She's like, hey, I'm leaving town. Do you want my studio? And I was like, I'm going to go. I think the day unfolds and we don't, neither of us get the gig. And so she said, I'm leaving town. Do you want my studio? And I was like, yeah. So it was, again, really just fortune smiled on me. So I moved back to Chicago. I had this playing opportunity with the Civic Orchestra of Chicago, kept me playing in orchestra. Now I'm doing all my rehearsals and performances, or many of my rehearsals and most of my performances inside Symphony Center in downtown Chicago. So that's a new thing as well, right? Like sitting on the stage and seeing like the big hall and like the nerves that come with all of that, and like performances on big stages, and that was really great. And of course the learning and getting to work with some great conductors, because they often will, I got to work with Daniel Barenboim, who at the time was the music director of he has some really amazing stuff to say about sound, like really interesting and intricate and really committed, right? Like a specific sound. It's got not just a good sound, but like this particular sound. And how do we do that together? And all that. And then I'm also jumping in my car and driving down to, I can't remember where it was. It's like some town, like an hour north, an hour south of Chicago, and teaching all the clarinet students in sort of the surrounding area band programs, teaching from like 3 to 9, like half-hour lessons, like 2 days a week. But again, I was just really lucky. My friend had already built this studio, and so the parents were accustomed to like paying a month in advance, which makes a big difference.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Makes a big difference if you get all of that money in at once. And she had them really well. They all believed in sort of a system of credit. So it's like, you pay for the month. If your kid gets sick, of course, and that shows up as a credit in your next month's bill. But if your kid decides at 3:30 that they don't want to go to their 4:30 lesson, like,
sorry,
well, no, I'm that's a choice you guys make as a family, but you can't just cancel on me. I'm sitting here in this room waiting for him. So, and I didn't have to do any of that, and I don't think I would have had the understanding or the courage actually to set up studio rules like that, because I didn't have any experience in that regard. I just sort of fell into it. So that was that year, and then
can I ask you one question about this specific orchestra? And I also want to, for any of the listeners that are listening to this that aren't musicians or aren't educated in the way orchestras are set up, what are the chair placements
Yeah.
for the various instruments. So like it follows the same pattern for most of the instruments, right? It's
Yeah.
principal and then second,
Yeah.
third.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
what were you in the
yeah,
civic orchestra?
well, Civic,
Okay.
we were just clarinets, and then they assigned us based on like, so they would accept four each year,
Yeah.
and then you just get assigned. And you know, some of the way the assignments are handed out, you start to get a sense of like who's favored or
Hmm.
who is held in. But it's also, there's a lot of opportunity, so everyone kind of gets the opportunity because it's a training orchestra. It's not a in professional orchestras. You know, the rank, obviously there are differences in the jobs, difference in what they do, but also difference in terms of like status. Not really so much, somewhat inside the ensemble, certainly outside the ensemble, right? People understand words like principal or something like that. They get that. But, you know, a lot of it has to do with, it's not about so much, it's about ability kind of in that moment at that time. But, you know, at the professional, whereas like for a Civic Orchestra of Chicago or All State Band, like that thing iterates every year, right? And it's a whole new, everything's tossed out, and you have, even Civic, you had to re-audition, right? What you weren't, whereas New World is different. New World, if you get in, at the end of their first year, they kind of make a decision about you. The default, the thing is set up though to want to bring you back. They do have some room though at the end of the first year if it's not working or whatever. But you know, New World is a 3-year sort of ride, which is, again, it's more money, it's more performing. New World basically operates like a professional orchestra with some other stuff around it. And not, you don't get paid as much, but they do cover your housing and you're living on South Beach, which is pretty nice. In any case, Civic. So yeah, but in a professional orchestra, it's different, right? Because these positions open for a moment in time, and then they don't open again. So the person I replaced as principal clarinetist of the Phoenix Symphony, a guy named Jack Rattery, he had been in the job, and I'm sort of guesstimating here, but I feel pretty good saying he was on the job for 30 years,
Wow.
right? And
Wow.
then I've been on the job now almost 20 years, right? So in 60 years, shortly, there will have been two people in this position. So it's not, and there've been, in that time period, there's been probably two or three people on that on the second chair, right? So it's a lot to do with vacancies. It's not so much about like, and so if what you want to do is play principal clarinet, flute, oboe, bassoon, whatever, like there's no guarantee that job, that there's going to be an opening for that position in every orchestra during your sort of career of auditioning, you know, or being interested. Or the current principal clarinetist, for instance. Oh, a great one is the guy who he was before. So the current principal clarinetist of the New York Philharmonic is an amazing artist. His name is Anthony McGill. So for any listeners that just want to like be blown away by great stuff, go check out Anthony's stuff. But Anthony replaced. There's a little bit of a in between, but a guy named Stanley Drucker. Stanley Drucker was principal clarinetist of the New York Philharmonic for over 50 years, right? So
Amazing.
that means someone could, the day he got the job, someone could be born, pick up the clarinet at 10, get amazing, play as if they had 12 fingers, and there won't be an opportunity to audition for that job to be principal of that orchestra, you know, until they're 50. Where are they? So a lot of it is, you know, so the titles and all that matters, but it's, you know, I was taking second auditions, and heartbroken when I didn't get those. I was runner up for a second job in a different orchestra that would have paid me more than my job in Phoenix. So at this point, I mean, when it comes to doing this professionally, you just want an opportunity. I mean, there are some people who are like, I own a lot of clarinets, but I don't own a second clarinet. Like, that's not me, for one thing. I mean, maybe at this point, not because I'm not good at it, because I haven't done it enough. But yeah. So the title thing, it's not the same thing on the professional level, right? It's like, you know, people get in these jobs, and there's not chair challenges every year. It's not like that. And they're just different jobs at the end of the day. And you sort of get it. It's like being a sideman versus being the headliner. I mean, those are just different jobs.
Yeah.
And there's no, being a side, not being the headliner, it among professionals isn't, it depends on what you're doing, but it could be like an incredibly prestigious thing, even if sort of the regular person doesn't get that exactly.
Right.
And it could be incredibly, like, financially rewarding depending on who you're playing with, right? I mean,
Correct. That's
yeah.
right. All right. So you're back at the Civic Orchestra in
Oh yeah, okay,
Chicago,
yeah.
and
Sure.
no, this is my job. This is I. So then I want to know what the uh, first professional. You got
Like
it. You got
after, yeah. We're still a little ways up. I am starting to work.
and I want to rephrase that. I'm not saying professional because at that level it's very professional. The wording should have been, "What is your first
Vocational.
symphony?"
Yeah.
Yeah. What? Yeah.
Yeah, and the good news is, I mean, at this point, I'm out of school, right? And it's my first year out of school, and I'm paying my bills entirely in music, right? So I got a little bit of a stipend from the Civic Orchestra of Chicago. I've got this teaching thing that I was just lucky, right? Right place, right time. Someone just gave me a gift. Um, and so I'm not having to like work at Starbucks or a bar or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. I started to pick up the very first like major professional thing I did was I substituted with the Boston Symphony when I was during the summer when I was at Tanglewood. So I was at Tanglewood doing a training thing, part of that program, and the BSO is there as well. There's their summer home, and so they were doing something big, and they needed more clarinets than they have in their complement. And so they reached into the summer program and asked. So I joined the union, right?
Oh
Like
wow. Yeah.
because you can't work in the
Nope.
Boston Symphony if you're not in the union. So I joined the local in DC actually, because that's where hyphenated local. That's where because I was like, I think I probably had to get the money from my parents, honestly, to pay like my first round of dues until I made some, got that check. But the first professional check I got was from the Boston Symphony.
That's cool.
Yeah, it definitely made me like, sort of misapprehend
Yeah.
how many zeros are usually in your check.
Oh.
While I was in Chicago doing Civic, I got to sub in with the Chicago Symphony, which was great. Had that first opportunity I got with them came again. I was home in the middle of the day. Someone got sick last minute. The personnel manager is just going through the list, and I was lucky to be on it and be home. And he was like, "Can you be here?" And to whatever it was, however many. And I was like, "Absolutely!" And like, threw my horn in the case and got in the car and got down there and sight read whatever. And then the next thing that happens for me is I get what's called the African American Fellowship with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, and that's like my first gig. It's not a tenure track position in that orchestra. They have had this fellowship since the late 80s. They have one position that they reserve for this program. And you basically play halftime in the Detroit Symphony, and the other halftime you're training and preparing. And the whole goal is to support African American musicians, so as to ultimately their goal is to like diversify, quote unquote, the field. So they're also giving you a lot of support in terms of preparing for auditions. So I'm working as a member of the DSO. Like 25, 30 weeks a year starting that next year. I did that for 2 years, and that was amazing, right? So I'm like, now I'm doing the thing. Like I'm playing, playing in a major orchestra. They gave
Does that
me
mean you completely picked up from Chicago and
Oh yeah,
right, gave away all the students, got out of the where you were
exactly.
living?
Yeah, everything, right?
Yep.
Everything. And so I'm doing that. I'm really learning like what it is to play the gig, right? Just another level of understanding about like communal pulse, pitch, how to prioritize, right? Like how do you triage? Like how do you like just understanding how to triage a part. Like, this has got to get, if I've got to learn all these notes, like these are the ones I got to learn first, and then these, and then these. Now, ideally, you want to get to all of that, but if you get that order wrong and you spend a lot of time so what's the most important thing? What's my job? A lot of it was like really understanding, like, what's the job? What's the task? And just being able to do that, building my confidence. On the audition front, taking every audition that comes and doing well. I'm starting to, I'm advancing. I'm getting into late rounds. I'm finaling. I'm running up for stuff. A big part of that is I have access to Detroit Symphony Hall. So, one thing that's really disconcerting about auditions is, they happen in the hall, in an empty orchestra hall. They're behind a screen, which or at least the first rounds are. Now we're moving towards keeping the screen up the whole time. At that time, the screen would often come down in the late rounds, but the first rounds are the hardest ones to get out of, right? That's when there's.
So what do you mean by the screen?
Okay, so orchestral auditions, professional American orchestral auditions, are at least in part screened, which is to say the candidate walks out on stage, middle of the stage. It's just weird, right? The stage is completely empty. The stage that's designed to seat like 100 people plus a chorus maybe is like empty except for like one music stand. And then out in the hall is the committee that's evaluating you, and they're literally behind a screen. There's a screen in front of them so that they cannot see the candidate who's playing. So they're just evaluating your ability to play, and everyone's playing the same thing. In the first round, let's say the first round is Beethoven 6, Midsummer Night's Dream, ticka, 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 ticka. Everyone's playing the same notes, the same parts, the same exact everything. And after every person, they're making a decision. Do we want to hear more from this person or not? So let's say the committee is 7 people. It might be 9. Usually it's 7. In most circumstances, they're just voting, and it's a secret ballot. And no discussion. Not, hey, Joe, what did you think of this person?
Wow, really?
Make your own. Yeah, make your own. And if you get a majority, it's yes or no. If you get 4 yeses, you're advanced to the second round. So usually, then, the first round, if there's like 80 people that show up to play that do the thing, and then everyone can play. Like, no one's just like doing this on a lark, right? Because you're paying for it yourself. You're paying your own airfare. You're paying your own hotel. And to even know that it's happening, you kind of have to like it's not like you're scrolling through Facebook and you're like, oh, hey, the Phoenix Symphony's auditioning violins tomorrow. I guess I'll just go down and. Right. That's not how you find out about it. So it's like a very inside thing. I mean, there's, it's transparent, but it's like, getting a job in higher ed, right? You have to be looking for that. In any case.
And basically they don't see you and you don't see them.
You don't see them. And that first cut is from like 80 to like 20. I mean, so they're dismissing like 60 people easily, maybe 65. So just learning how to do that, and to get back to the Detroit thing, right? What did Detroit offer me was access to the hall. That's like ice time. You're from upstate New York, right? That's like a gift, because playing an audition in an empty hall with the sound reflecting back at you, and you're seeing just like acres of empty seats, and then like out there, like X yards away from you, there's this black screen, and behind that, are people. Like, it's a real head trip. And so just getting to practice in that simulative environment, right, where I would do a lot of practice. We would have rehearsals, the orchestra would leave, I would come out onto stage and practice in the empty hall, and just get used to like seeing and hearing. These are big spaces, right? So getting used to like playing for like competitive like you're competing and you're being evaluating, and like you're trying to change your life, and there's all this going on. And so and then the sound is different. So that was a big thing for me in Detroit, was getting to just have access to their stage. And then the members of the symphony were really supportive of me. So getting to do sort of like mock auditions, like a mock interview, got to play for them. And really, a lot of this is like, it's like the combines or anything. Pick your sporting event. A lot of visualization, a lot of like, not just knowing how to do it. It's mostly knowing how to do it on command right now,
Yep.
right? Like make this free throw right now when everything's on the line and everyone's yelling and screaming. Like it's not like what's the mechanics of making a free throw. Like you can understand that in high school, younger. I go through 2 years in Detroit, lots of doing well, finals. That starts to lose its luster, actually, right? In the beginning, making the finals was like huge. I didn't even necessarily care so much about the gig, but and just wanting to start my life. In any case, leave Detroit without having yet secured a position, auditioned again for New World, got in this time, wasn't nearly as excited, didn't want it in the same way, right? I didn't want this. I wanted to start my life. I wanted to, I was sick of, just being on the way. Fortunately, so in the spring and May of 2001, I auditioned for the Phoenix Symphony. This is while I'm still in Detroit. Started in the first round, make it to the finals, at the end of which they don't hire anybody. It's a no hire, which now as a professional, I think is just like outrageous. Like all these people have flown, like we've got to I just think professional orchestras, a no hire should be an unacceptable thing, unless you're the one paying for unless you're paying for all the flight, right? You're just like,
right. And how does what's the explanation for something like that?
Well, it's funny because Ricardo makes an appearance in the story now. So that summer, I am headed. I finished in Detroit. I'm going to be starting in New World in September. So I'm moving now from Detroit to South Beach to Miami. Mm-hmm. So I drive. I'm going to go through Maryland. When I get to Maryland, it's instruments again. I'm going to go to New York and pick up some new instruments. And so Ricardo's there, and I'm going to go meet him. So we're playing, and at this point, Phoenix has announced that they're going to do the audition again in October. And I, in my mind, had thought, I'm not going to go. And I was starting to be like, I think I might, like I was beginning to give some room in my thinking that I was really sick of being subject to the audition process. And I was the sort of asking, for me, it felt like I was just asking 7 strangers permission to start my life. And it just felt like a crazy arrangement. I was tired of it. So I was beginning to sort of express that a little bit. And so one of the first places I was going to express it was like, I was not going to go retake the Phoenix audition. And for me, that felt like I'm going to exert some control here. And also my feeling was, I already to your point, I made it to the finals. They heard me and they passed. What's the best thing that can happen here? I can make it to the finals again, because the screen at the time, the screen would come down. So they take the screen down in the finals. So now they're looking at you. They know who you. Yeah, right. That's like defeats the whole purpose of anonymity, to be like at the point of hire, we actually now want to know like what you look like, and it invites like all kinds of potential bias. Yep. At the time, I just accepted it as the way. Now I've studied that stuff and I have some different ideas about it. But in any case, just to be clear that and why I knew that they would know who I was.
Did you just say you're becoming a wise old man? Is that kind of?
I mean, that's about the 6th time I've said that. I mean, I feel like we should just call this the Wise Old Man Podcast, right?
You know what? That's a damn good name right there.
So I'm talking to Ricardo. He's listening. I remember this so clear. And he looks up. I said, I'm not going to go back to Phoenix. They heard me, blah, 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 blah. And inside, I'm feeling like good. Like I'm finally like making some choices. I'm not just going to be subject to the international musician. And I'm just going to go whatever the international musician, because that's where the openings come out, right? In the union paper in the back 3 pages. Like, and that's where you find out what you're going to do for the next 3 months. I've been
looking for triangle auditions for years. They never show up.
It's called principal percussion. It's like 16 instruments they got to work on.
No, thank you.
Exactly. So Ricardo's listening, and he says, you need to get over yourself.
Those moments, yeah.
And he was, to answer to your question, there's a long way of answering that question. So your question is like, what's happening when there's a no hire? And that's what he said to me. He's like, you think that no hire is about you? That's not about you. it's about a committee that, probably had some politics and some, personality stuff. And the easiest thing for their own sort of well-being was to not hire somebody because they couldn't agree and no one was willing to really like tip over the apple cart. Mm-hmm. And it probably doesn't serve the player, right? Because you think you're doing someone a favor, but they still have to get through tenure and probation. And like someone if you try to force someone down someone's throat, you might get it down there after the audition. They're going to vomit it back up through the mm-hmm. probation process. They're going to be really unsupportive of this person. But I didn't understand that, I didn't. And so I listened to that and I was like, okay, because Ricardo was not big on he's not like a sage. That's not like his thing. For him to say something like that, I listened. So I sent my stuff in. I actually asked them, I was like, hey, seeing as how I just, made it to the finals in May, could you see your way to advance me? Since you've already determined my playing to be. And they were like, nope.
Oh, wow.
So I came back out in October and started in the first round again, made it to the finals again. And then this time got the gig. And that sort of brings us, to Phoenix and starting my life as a sort of professional musician. And that's what I wanted, right? I wanted to be able to, all of this talking, if you can remember, like once I left school and you're out, you're meeting people and they're like, what do you do? It's like very difficult to answer that question with something that sounds real.
Professional auditioner.
Yeah.
Right? It's
exactly. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. And even if you're doing well, and it's like in this world, look, I was doing well. I had lots of reasons to feel good and lots of ways fortune had smiled on me and I'd gotten breaks, but you still don't have an answer that like you could put on a business card. And so even in Detroit, I was definitely the closest I'd come up to, but even then, right, I'm not a member of that orchestra, right? I'm not a tenure track member. That was clear both to me and to them. So anyway, so Phoenix, and then man, that brings us up to here.
It's definitely an honor for me to be in your ears, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to the podcast and possibly rating it, sharing it, and if you have the time to write a review. I hope the content that I'm delivering is something very special to you, and once again, thank you so much for listening.